Let's talk about patterns. You're sort of famous for that idea.
That hidden, secret place where heaven and earth are meeting.
What gets highest praise, highest worth? And it's sex, pleasure, money, power, all the usual suspects. That means we become bad priests.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this clip, Bishop Barron and Jonathan Pageau are talking about biblical patterns. This is absolutely mind-boggling. Check this out.
Let's talk about patterns. You're sort of famous for that idea. Sort of a overarching fundamental pattern, which is then repeated analogously at lower levels of the biblical story. Imitating in a way, you is an example of a tree. There's the tree, the grand pattern, but then within that, underneath it, so to speak, are little trees. So the branches and the twigs and so on look like little trees. So that fractal quality, as you say, overarching pattern that's mimicked, For me in the Bible, one of those is the temple. Mm-hmm. That the temple is such a master idea in the Bible. Talk about that a little bit as you read it.
Well, so the temple, the first thing we need to start with, even to understand the temple, is the basic structure in Genesis 1 of the notion of heaven and earth, and then that man is the anchor between the two, right? So man is a gathering of earth, right? You gather dust together, and then you actually put heaven inside, you blow air into it, and that man anchors the world together. And that anchor has a function, which is to bring multiplicity into purpose, right? To bring multiplicity into name, into purpose, into pattern, all the things that are invisible that manage visible things. And so you can do that at the individual level. That's what Adam is. That's why he then names the animals. He's the function that he has in the garden. But then those can be brought into larger forms. And the tabernacle and the temple, that's what they are. They basically gather reality together into a secret place where heaven and earth are touching each other, which gives the reason why we're together, gives us a way back into the garden, really, is what's happening in the temple. But then also the influence of that place where the glory of God touches the world, then, let's say, ripples out into reality in a very specific way that's manifested symbolically by the elements that are used, the veils, the different metals, the different courts, but then also the way that, even especially the tabernacle, the way that then Israel is gathered outside in an ordered pattern in order to represent that the reason why they exist as one is that hidden, secret place where heaven and earth are meeting. And the church fathers, and starting with St. Paul, reminds us that that's how you're made too. Right, and so you're the temple of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. The heart of the human contains heaven and earth and is a little place where that is happening. So when we talk about soul and body, these types of structures, it's all connected from Genesis to the temple and then to how we live our lives every day.
Adam's a priest, isn't he? I mean, so if Eden is a kind of temple, it's a mountain, and the rivers flow out from it. So like Mount Zion, the true pole of the earth, etc., Adam is operating as a priest, reconciling heaven and earth. And we see in him, therefore, the purpose of our human life, right? Is that we're meant to be priests of the new creation, etc. I've often said Genesis is all about right worship and false worship. The basic problem with us is we worship incorrectly. Yeah. What gets highest praise, highest worth? And it's sex, pleasure, money, power, all the usual suspects. That means we become bad priests. We're like the priests of Baal, right? We're hopping around the wrong altars. Adam is a rightly constituted priest. And then Israel, there's your fractal thing, Israel becomes a priestly people, right? They're meant to worship aright. And God teaches them what right worship looks like.
And you can understand it. It's pretty simple once you see that when we talk about the fractal. So basically, you have all things are given up into their higher participation in the fractal. So you have the root, or you have the top that comes down and multiplies itself. And every time one element of the fractal doesn't see itself as owing to that which, or giving up, or celebrating to that where it comes from, then that's pride. And that's the fall. It's the fall because it's the whole problem of Lucifer, right? It's like, the whole imagery of Lucifer is actually very powerful if you think about it. It's like this morning star that comes up and is the brightest star. And then it starts to think that it owns that light. It actually is the brightest star. It is the one that's bringing the light of the sun to us. But if it forgets where its light comes from, then it becomes fallen. And that's what happens to Adam. But then that's the structure, again, of the entire Bible, of seeing, like you said, as soon as you turn the highest attention, if you put it on something that's not God, then it gets cut off and it starts to decompose.
And that's Augustine, right? Love God and love everything else for the sake of God.
That's right.
But the basic problem is we turn to creatures rather than to the Creator, and then all the disintegration follows, including a body and soul are apart. And I would argue a lot of it's up and down the centuries, it's a mark of sin, but especially today, the dis-ease people have with their own bodies, the disassociation between the real me, whatever that is, and then my body, which has to be manipulated to bring it into line with the real me. All of that is a disintegration of this biblical anthropology. I say a healthy, even philosophical anthropology.
Yeah, it really is. And if you understand Christ and you understand Adam even already as the union of meaning and purpose and name and all these invisible things with the created world, then as we move away from God, and as Christianity starts to fragment and to break down, then that gets separated.
Yeah.
And then heaven and earth become separated again, and that represents itself in all the different forms of alienation that we find. The most recent one being the one of people actually hating their own bodies. And thinking that what they think of themselves and the constitution of their body are so completely separate that they have to, like you said, manipulate the world in order to realign them. But
it's such a rich vein to be mining here, because think of materialism, which is the dominant philosophy of the secular world. It's, in biblical terms, earth is moved off here and heaven is up there somewhere in some fantasy world. When in fact, what the scientists investigate is heaven. They're investigating intelligibility, intelligible patterns, which are non-reducible to matter, right? They're kind of above, they're an organizing principle of matter. And so you can't really do science even without heaven.
No.
And there I think of that famous essay by Eugene Wigner. You know, he was a secular Jewish scientist, a contemporary of Niels Bohr and those people. But what he was noticing in his physics was mathematics. You can't do physics without the highest mathematics. So he writes an article called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Physical Sciences. And what he's not a religious man, he says that. But he's wondering at it, and he uses the word miracle over and over again. How miraculous that as we look at the physical world, we have to use achingly high mathematics to describe it.
Yeah.
Well, see, I've seen biblical terms, that's the logos, right, which creates all things, endowing them with intelligibility. And then Adam, who names the animals. That's the move, isn't it? The Father saw him as the scientist, philosopher, right? But see, it's fallen apart.
I totally agree, and it's funny. In some ways, it's a blind spot of the materialist. It's like it's as if they can't see that they need identities and they need these structures, and what they're looking for is regularity in the world, and that regularity manifests itself as a cohesive pattern of being. And that is exactly what, if you read St. Maximus, you read some of the church fathers, that's what they're talking about. And you read the Neoplatonists, that's what they're talking about. It's not, because the materialist wants to, at least, the thrust is to reduce everything to these kind of mechanical causation.
Right.
They want spirit to be something that acts like mechanical causation, but it isn't. It's the binding of identity. It's the binding of name. It's the binding of purpose that makes you actually see that something. Like, let's say a scientist is a good example. For a scientist to study something, they already have to identify it.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you're studying flowers, you're not studying rhinoceroses. And so you have to say, oh, I'm studying a flower that binds the phenomena into a pattern, and then you analyze phenomena to see in what way it fits with the pattern.
Yeah.
If it doesn't fit with the pattern, you have to either change your theory or you have to adjust the way you're studying it. But that's actually the union of heaven and earth that's described in Genesis 1.
Yeah. I wonder if you agree with this. This oldest problem in philosophy in a way is how to bring together soul and body. How do you think them together? You have Descartes' famous solution through the pineal gland in the brain. The ghost of the machine links up to the body and all this stuff. The solution to all that is, hey, don't think of matter and spirit as two phenomena within one plane. One's like at a higher dimension of existence. So just as a line can contain an infinity of points because it's a higher dimension, The cube can include an infinity of squares. It's a higher dimension. That the pattern isn't alongside of matter. It's higher than matter. It organizes it. So all these questions that are predicated upon competition, how do we think them together? Don't play that game. That's the wrong game.
Yeah, it's really constraint on multiplicity. That's
okay.
For a modern like a modern person, it's probably the best way to understand it, is that there are constraints on multiplicity which brings it together and makes it act together into one body.
Yeah.
And that's what heaven is. And it appears at every level of being, and it's difficult for people to understand because, let's say, in the world, let's say you exist in a country, right? And that country is a little bit of heaven in the sense that the country binds all of us together, brings us together. Now, the country also has physical phenomena, right? And so that's what makes it difficult for people to understand that there are things that actually have physical phenomena above us, but that constrain us and act in a manner that's heaven. But the way it constrains is invisible. You can't, like, there's nothing, how can I say this? Like, there's nothing in a country that makes it exist as a country which can be completely contained by visibility.
Right.
It's like, why do I recognize an American if we're both in Italy? It's because there's an invisible constraint on us.
Yeah. Well, you stay with invisibility for a second, because David Tracy, now long retired, but professor at the University of Chicago, one of the most prominent theologians of the last 50 years, he wrote an article where he said, today, the prime access to the invisible is mathematics. And he meant Wigner's point, that if you're doing mathematics, well, you've left the cave behind in Platonic language. You've moved into a higher mode of being. And so mathematics does order you toward this world of patterns, this world of meaning. But somehow we think everything's reducible to the material, but you can't begin to analyze material without some appeal to the numeric or the pattern, right? So Bertrand Russell, many years ago, the great atheist, said, I think mathematics is the prime source of belief in gods. And my answer is it's one of them. It's a route of access, because you're noticing something there. Mathematics is different than this world of ordinary, material experience.
There's a couple of things that I'm going to take away from this video. The first thing is that you can't reduce the Bible to a very reductionistic, literal interpretation of its content. There are theological themes and historical narratives that have to be understood in their literary context to even make sense of the Bible. For example, in this talk, Jonathan Pageau and Bishop Barron are explaining the theological concepts of temple and priest and the Garden of Eden and various forms. The second thing is that directly connects to how we perceive the world. You can't reduce the world down to mechanical causes. You can't reduce the world down to mere materialism. There are recognizable patterns that are needed that transcend this world in order to make sense of the world, but not just the world, the Bible also. To me, that is absolutely mind-boggling when you begin to think about it. And this conversation between Jonathan Pageau and Bishop Barron helped me to see just how important recognizing patterns are. All right, I hope you liked this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you like videos like this. So there will be more coming out here in the future, and I hope you have a great day. Peace.